Hello, guys. Today as promised, this is the 30th anniversary of the passing of Selena Quintanilla Perez, the slain Tejano singer who passed away due to an assassin's bullet on March the 31st, 1995. And I said I would do the movie review of the movie that came out March the 11th, 1997, about her life. So here it goes. So, what's the background of this film? Basically, it came out almost 2 years to the date of when she passed away. A couple of weeks shy, same month, same, uh, you know, and it was it was the idea of Selena's father. See, Selena was known in Texas by pretty much everyone, but outside of Texas, she really was not known by the general audience. Um, the general population that did not speak Spanish and did not listen to Tejano music did not know who she was because she sang a specific type of music known as Tejano music, which we talked about is is the the traditional music of Tex-Mex people, basically Mexican Americans in Texas. It's a combination of Mexican music, R&B music, soul music, blues music, and country music. Basically, a synthesis of Mexican style. It came about, in the early 20th century. Some legends in that music are Narciso Martinez and Flaco Jimenez and the likes of those. But that music is usually charted as regional Mexican music, not necessarily, uh, you know, the entire Latin charts. So a lot of people, even that listen to Spanish music, might not have known who necessarily she was. But this movie, the intentions of this movie were to expose her to the world. So the production for the movie began in the early part of 1997, like in January and February, where they began looking for people to play her. Now there was a contest put out by her dad, a nationwide contest. Latinas from all over the country were asked to write in and audition. Initially, who we had in mind was Selma Hayek, but Selma Hayek turned down the role, considering it to be too soon. It was not even 2 years. Okay, listen, it was not even 2 years yet that she had been passed away, and they were already making a movie. So Selma Hayek turned it down. So uh, eventually, they auditioned a lot of girls. Basically, every girl in Miami, San Antonio, Corpus Christi, El Paso, New York, everywhere where there's a huge Hispanic population, they auditioned every single girl. And finally, they came down to Jennifer Lopez. Now, this caused a tremendous stir in the Hispanic community because, as we talk about a lot in this channel, there's ethnic differences among Hispanic people. J Lo, first of all, J Lo didn't have any acting experience. She started off on the Fly Girls in the early '90s, and she was a backup dancer for MC Hammer. She hadn't really been in any type of movies before this. Didn't have any acting experience, and secondly, she was a girl born in the Bronx of New Yorican or Puerto Rican, uh, born in the mainland United States heritage. Couldn't be any more different than Selena as far as their ethnicities. But they chose her because she had a dancing experience. She didn't have any singing experience. She couldn't sing, and she had uh, acting. I mean, she had a similar body type and some acting experience, I guess, if you could call if you could call being in the Fly Girls acting, right? Many people would not. Um, for the director of this movie, uh, Abraham chose uh, Edward James Olmos. Now we talked about Edward James Olmos before. There's a movie review of my other favorite movie that he did called American Me in 1992, which was about the life or the origins of the Mexican mafia and the life of the man whose death inspired basically the war between the two prominent Mexican American gangs in the California prison system, the Nuestra Familia and the Mexican mafia called Rudy Cheyenne Cadena. So basically, and also another famous movie by Edward James Olmos, Stand and Deliver, about a East LA math teacher named Jaime Escalante. So basically, Edward James Olmos was the right person to direct this film because based on his credentials making those two movies, he's basically the Hispanic Spike Lee. He specializes in culturally relevant and historic films about prominent uh, Latino figures. So he's already done one. He was in hot water for the one in American Me. He was praised for Stand and Deliver, so they figured, hey, why not give him to this? This was originally given to Gregory Nava upon the urging of Mexican American civil rights leader Montezuma Esparza, but uh, Abraham didn't really like him, so they went with Edward James Olmos. Constance Marie was cast as the mother, Marcella, and she really didn't do much. She initially tried out for the role of Selena. She didn't get that part, but she did get the part of the mother. After this much like J Lo, this catapulted her into other success, where she went on to play the part of Angie, the mother on the George Lopez show. John Seta, who was also a rising star in the in the Latino American community because he's Puerto Rican. He was chosen as uh, Selena's to play the part of Selena's husband, Chris Perez. He had been in a movie alongside New York Undercover actress Gloria Velez and called "I Like It Like That," which on that in the soundtrack to that movie, it was a movie that came out in 1993. On the soundtrack to that movie, Selena actually sang on the soundtrack to that movie. So that was kind of cool. She sang a song with uh, she sang a song with I can't find the name of the group, but anyway, she was featured on that soundtrack as well. So that was an interesting choice that they chose him. Edward James Olmos, in addition to directing the movie, he also stars as the father, Abraham Quintanilla, where he had to put on 10 pounds in order to play the part. And that pretty much, and Jacob Vargas, who also he played in Living La Vida Loca, a early 1990s gangster film about girls in California. So that pretty much rounds out the cast of this film. And how does the film start? Well, we start off. with Selena's concert, the famous concert in Houston, Texas. And this was a homecoming for her because she was born in Lake Jackson, so basically, which is adjacent to Houston. And this was her home state, the Houston Astrodome, performing one of the biggest performances, famous purple dress. It's her final performance, and here she performs a melody of disco hits, which is basically her dream to sing English in front of the crowd that uh, she really loved. She really loved. She always wanted to sing English, and she finally got the chance. But then we backtrack to when her father was young. Her father was in a doo-wop band called the Dinos, and they're going to this club. And in the club, they were not all fam. The club was, segregated. Uh, like Lisa and I spoke about, there were segregation laws on the books in Texas, and the club owner did not want to let a Mexican American group perform. He said he calls the manager up. He says, "I thought they were the Dinos. I thought they were Italian." But he looks at them. He says, "No, they're Mexican. I don't want Mexicans performing at my club. Uh, get rid of them." So they go to a Mexican club and they start to play Blue Moon, which is a pop song. And the Mexican audience hates it. They throw them out. They almost kill them. They rather rush them to the car because it's a riot broke out. These Mexican Americans, they want to hear Mexican music, Tejano music. They don't want to hear Blue Moon, You See Me Standing Alone. They're like, "Oh, this is gringo music. Get this out of here." So after that, Abraham is raising his children. He now has three children. He has Selena, he has Abraham Jr., AB, and his daughter Suzette. And he's living, pretty much comfortable, lower middle class life. They managed to move out of the barrio of the barrio. They now live comfortably, but he's still struggling, and he still has the dream to be a musician. And Selena's seen playing with her brothers and sisters. She has a chicken. She owns a chicken, and the chicken poops in the bathtub. And our mom's like, "Selena, you got chicken poop all over the freaking bathtub. How dare you?" Right? So the mom is throwing a fit. But after this, Abraham is playing his guitar because he still dreams of making it big in the music industry. He still hasn't given that dream up yet. And he's singing "We Belong Together," a song by yet another tragic Mexican American figure, the singer Richie Valens, who passed away in February of 1959. The so-called "They the Music" died. And while he's singing this, Selena's singing along with him, with her dad, and he notices that she has a beautiful voice. So immediately, a light bulb goes off in his head, similar to how Michael Jackson's father, a light bulb went off in his head when he heard Michael sing. A light bulb goes off in Abraham's head, and he goes out of his way. He's living below the poverty line. This guy, almost barely just scraping by. The family has to go on welfare, even though he doesn't want to go on welfare. There's a scene in the movie where it's cut out, but even though he doesn't want to go on welfare, he's forced to, because things are tight. Money is tight at this point in time. We're going, this is the 70s. We talked about it before, the economic malaise of the late 70s. You know what I mean? So during the Jimmy Carter era. So, but he doesn't care because he's a musician, and in his mind, like my teacher at SA, he told me, he's gonna be a musician no matter what. And that's the problem with being with a musician, is that a musician never gives up his or her dream of making it in the music business, despite their responsibilities elsewhere. Despite the fact that, like Abraham, they may have kids, but they still want to make it. They still have dreams of making it. And now he sees that he has his chance to start over. So he spends all his money on used equipment, and he's coming back to the house with these guitar amps, these guitars, these drums, and everything is secondhand. Nothing works, but he's still determined. He's determined to be a drill sergeant with these kids. He's determined to have them perform no matter what. even though they don't want to. Selena says, but I don't want to sing. I don't want to play. I want to play, but not this kind of play. I want to play outside, run, jump, do things that kids do. He says, no, certain hour each day you're going to devote to this. And on top of that, they don't want to play his style of music. He wants them to play 50s music. They're not for 50s music. They want to play their style of music, the Eagles, Donna Summer. It's the 70s. Why would they want to play doo-wop? They don't even listen to that shit, right? But Abraham's hearing exactly, Lisa. Yep. Exact same. If you guys recall, in the Jackson family of the American Dream, in that special that aired in 1992, there was an exact same scene that was parallel to this scene, where Joe Jackson can't afford anything either. You know what I mean? His son's shoes have holes in them, and this guy is going out there buying amps for the kids to perform. Selena's father did the exact same thing. You know, you know what I mean? And he makes them, he forces them. They have to do it. You know what I mean? They have no other choice. And this is different from everybody. Their fathers were different than everybody else's parents, because our parents, my parents in particular, my family, they don't believe in my musical dreams. They never did. They think it's bullshit. you know, you know what I mean? And they discourage us from wanting to play music a lot of times. But their fathers were musicians, so they forced them to do they forced them to do it. Right? So he's forcing them, he's pushing them. And Selena likes it, but the only thing is she doesn't like the kind of songs that they're forced to sing. Her sister doesn't like it at all. The sister, because they forced the sister to play the drums, and the sister's like, but girls don't play the drums. And the father's like, yes, they do, but eventually they get really good. And Abraham gets it in his head. He's laying there one day with his wife, and he's like, you know what? We're living here in this white community, predominantly white community, Lake Jackson, and there are no Mexican restaurants. And the mother's like, what are you talking about, Abraham? At this time of night, you're thinking about food? He's like, no, white people love Mexican food. If we opened up a Mexican restaurant, we could not only have a business of our own, but we would have a place for the kids to perform on a constant basis. She's like, Abraham, come on, we're just making it. Are you kidding me with this with this bullshit? Like, always dreaming. Remember what I said a couple of videos ago, guys, that women keep men grounded? You know what I mean? Like, they keep men thinking about reality and not always dreaming about the grandiose. Well, that's how his wife was. But he lies to her basically. Hey, what's up, David? He tells her, I'm not going to quit my job. You know what I mean? I promise you, I'm not going to quit my job. So they buy the restaurant, and while they're putting up the sign says, Papa, the name of the restaurant is Papa Gallos, but it says Papa Yo-Yos. And Abraham's upset with the way the sign looks. He like the G looks like a Y. He says, let me get up there. The guy's up there putting the sign up. He's like, let me get up there. And he gets up there and he fixes the sign himself. This is how hands-on this man is. You know what I mean? He's not going to let anybody do anything. He's going to want to be completely hands-on. So initially, the restaurant is doing pretty well. And the wife is like, yeah, I think you were right about white people loving Mexican food, because, I mean, we're selling like hotcakes. We don't even have enough food, right, to go on it. And then he drops a bomb on her. She says, Maricela, I quit my job. And she's like, what, Abraham? You swore that you wouldn't. How dare you? And she's arguing with him and shit. And then, we see Selena performing. People are giving her compliments. She's singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And, people are loving it. But no, David. Not to stop the review, but Selena wasn't a lesbian at all. Uh, David, no. um, but but people are loving Selena's performances at the restaurant. But the problem is we're in a recession. Ronald Reagan just got in the early 80s. Like I said, people praise him now. But when he first got in, he did a lot of the same shit that Trump was doing with the tariffs and everything. And it caused a huge recession in the economy. And small businesses like Selena's family's restaurant suffered and they went out of business. So now they have to move from where they are in this comfortable lower middle class community in Houston, Lake Jackson, to all the way to Corpus Christi in the south of Texas, where um, where their cousins and stuff live and go live with family. And they don't want to do that because they're like, man, I don't want to go live with a bunch of Hectors and all these other cousins. Hispanics have big families, but they have to because the family's broke. So they pack up everything and they leave. But this is better for them musically because it's a bigger community. South Texas is predominantly Hispanic, uh, and they're able to perform this type of Hispanic, this type of music. But Abraham pulls her aside and says, listen, because she's doing the performances and she's singing English music and nobody's showing up. So what Selena's father tells her is that you have to change your style of music. You're never going to make it singing English music. You have to sing Spanish. And she's like, but I don't even know Spanish. You know what I mean? I can't even speak it. He says, I'll teach you. So she never learned to speak Spanish. Well, she did eventually, but initially she never really learned. She learned through playing music. That was her caveat. She would learn the songs first and then the language to converse it. She would learn that second. So he starts teaching her. And another thing the mother suggests is that she incorporate dance moves into her repertoire. So she tells her about cumbia, which is cumbia is a style of music, like I said, that originated in Colombia. It's a it's an Afro-Caribbean style of music because Colombia, like other South American countries, had a huge black population. But in the 50s and 60s, this native Colombian music migrated to Mexico and it became more popular in Mexico, ironically, than it even among Mexicans than it even was among Colombians. So her mom is into this style of dance, and she teaches her to swivel her hips and to dance like a washing machine. It's a really cute scene where the mom is teaching her to dance. So that's when she begins to, before she used to stand there and sing, now she begins to incorporate dance moves into her repertoire, and that causes her to blow up that style of music. And then they show her becoming a teenager. They show her performing at festivals. The Bailas a Cumbia, which is one of her biggest songs, blows up, which is a cumbia hit. And her brother, they don't show this really in the movie, but her brother begins to write her songs, and he begins to write better songs than the covers that the old school covers that they were doing, in Spanish. And she's becoming a really success, but she's trying to incorporate more sexual appeal into her music. This is the late 80s. So Madonna had already come out in 1984 with the sexual revolution in music. Janet Jackson was out. So she has this idea from Janet Jackson, called a bustier, right? Like a little bra thing, right? And the father doesn't know about it. She's already designing her own outfits. So she has a jacket on, and she takes the jacket off, and there's the bustier. The father sees it, and he goes crazy. He's like, a bustier, a bustier. You're wearing a bra out there on stage. Your men could see your breast. Are you kidding me? He's angry, right? But she's like, all the other stars are wearing it, you know. Janet Jackson, Madonna. He said, I don't care what they're wearing. They're not my daughter. You're not gonna go out there and you're not gonna wear that. But the mother's like, oh, don't listen to him. She wears it anyway, right? And she, like I said, she's blowing up. She's becoming a huge star. But they're having a problem. Some of their bandmates they originally had left the band, and they're in need of a new guitarist. So the brother comes across this young man, Chris Perez. a guitarist. He used to be a guitarist in a heavy metal band. And the father, of course, the father hates it. He's like, we don't do heavy metal music. The kid comes here with long hair, dirty clothes. I mean, this is the 80s. So this is the 80s. Hair metal bands are all the rage in the world right now. You know what I mean? So of course he's going to be into that. And he's a hell of a guitarist. He plays the guitar for her. I mean, for the father and the brother for the interview, and he just blows it away. But he's like, all right, as long as he behaves and as long as he plays the style of music we want to play, want to put a little bit more rock and roll, a little bit more heavy metal into the music, let's go ahead, let's do it. So they have to, but he has to cut his hair. So Selena and her sister are tasked with cutting the young guy's hair. But Selena likes him. You know what I mean? She thinks he's handsome. And like her and the sister are gushing about how cute they think he is. And they cut his hair. But now Selena has a crush. Now, keep in mind, she led a really secluded life. She wasn't allowed to date. Her father took her out of school when she was young, and she was homeschooled. So none of them were allowed to date. Even the brother wasn't even allowed to date. You know, they weren't allowed to have crushes or boyfriends and girlfriends. They were around each other all the time, always performing. So this is really the first guy that she really felt an attraction to. And plus, he has a bad boy edge to him, right? He comes from a rock and roll band. He comes from, you know, the other side of the tracks, as it were. And you know, women are attracted to, girls are attracted to men like that. You know what I mean? A story as old as time, forbidden fruit, right? So, but she's forbidden from dating anybody in the band. But of course, you know what happens? Eventually, they bond. Chris tells her that you know, when he was growing up, his parents didn't want him to play music. His parents thought music was, you know, bad news, would get him into trouble. And she's like, really? My dad, you know, he forced us to play music, you know? So they had like different opposite upbringings. Like she's a goody two shoes girl. She's like a church girl. He's like, you know, this guy that's he been out there, you know. So eventually they're on the tour bus one day and they kiss and somebody catches them. And of course, man, if if Abraham were to find out that this guy who he didn't want to hire in the first place is now dating his daughter, I mean, he gonna flip, right? He does, you know, and he forbids the relationship, and he says, and she says, "Well, Chris, he loves me," and and the father goes, "Of course, because you're young, you're beautiful, and you're rich." You know what I mean? But Selena doesn't. She doesn't stay away. She loves him anyway. The cutest scene of them is when they go on a date. They go for pizza, and that's when Selena reveals her work. So reporters ask me all the time, "What do I do to work out?" And Selena goes, "I just tell him I eat pizza all day." And then Chris puts too much hot sauce on his pizza, and he can't even eat it. You know what I mean? That's how he kind of fucked up his own pizza. But anyway, really cute moments between them. And then again, when some of Chris's friends trash the hotel room, and the band has to pay the bills, you know, he gets in trouble again. And she's like, "Chris, why do you always do this? You know what I mean? Don't you know I love you? Am I enough for you?" And you know, they have kind of a fight, but the love story between them is really cute. But yeah, Selena goes to the Latin Grammys, right? And the scene with the Latin Grammys always got to me because they're shopping for a dress, right? Selena and her friend, and this is in Los Angeles, right? They're shopping for a dress, and Selena's like, "I want this specific outfit," and the lady's like, "No, I think, you know, this outfit is more your speed." And then Selena uh, she starts to see all the people in the mall rushing towards Selena, and that she's not just an everyday average Jane. She's a she's a she's a celebrity. You know what I mean? And what this was this woman in the clothing store. She was being racist. You know what I mean? She assumed because Selena was Mexican that she was broke. You know what I mean? And that she couldn't afford the outfit that she wanted it. But seeing that she was actually somebody and these people were mobbing her, you know, the woman had egg on her face and had to eat her own words. And I love that part because store owners do act like that when it comes to minorities and people of color. You know what I mean? They assume because we're people of color that we can't afford certain shit, but they don't know the kind of money that we have. So that scene always stuck out to me. So Selena goes to the Latin Grammys. She wins at the Latin Grammys, you know, and she's just blowing up everywhere. But the one thing she wants, the one thing that eludes her, she has Chris. She's in love with Chris. She's doing her thing. She's even gone to Mexico. And the scene where the father is coaching them because they have to go to Mexico. And he's like, no, in Mexico, they have a hard time accepting us because your Spanish is not great, right? We have to be we have to work twice as hard as everyday other Americans because their homelands, the other Americans, the European Americans, their homelands are across the sea, you know, in Italy, in Germany, in Eastern Europe, in France, in Spain. Our homeland is right here, next door. So we have to know about we have to know about Oprah and Christina. We have to we have to know about Menudo and Boyz II Men or whatever. Like we have to know both cultures basically. So they go down to Mexico, and you don't think initially that they're gonna like them in Mexico, but they do. It gets to be so rabid in Mexico that the fans are actually tearing down the stage to get to Selena, and Selena, with such stage presence, calms them down with one shush, and she was able to command them. And that's the mark of a true performer. When a performer, any kind of genre, especially music, we've seen MJ do it all the time, where he had the crowd in the palm of his hand. That's the kind of stage presence that this woman had this year. And it was powerful, man. It just showed how popular she was. That even in another country where she doesn't really speak the language, that doesn't have a great command of Spanish, she's still able to manipulate the crowd through motions. So, and then now finally we're introduced to Yolanda, who is played by Lupe Altiveros. And we're introduced to the obsessive behavior of Yolanda. But we're kind of introduced to it in a sense, like she plays a background role in the movie. And then later on, when the father and Selena confront her about the stealing from the fan club, then we start to see how obsessive she is. They don't really show it all that much. Like that's one of the things that will confuse a lot of viewers because they're like, if you don't know anything about the story and you don't read more into it, they're like, well, this lady was just a fan club president. Why did she shoot Selena? The Netflix series that came out in 2020, it sheds a little bit more light on it than this film. In this one, we just get the sense that she shot her because she was fired. We don't really get the sense of the obsession necessarily with Selena or the love affair, the unrequited love affair with Selena in this version, in this 1997 version. And that was done deliberately because they wanted to show more the life of Selena than the death of Selena, the directors. They wanted to highlight more that than the death. They don't even show the shooting scene when Selena is ultimately murdered as she's in a white dress, she's on stage, and they just show her dropping the white rose, the white flower, because she has a song "Como la Flor," right? And she's singing "Dreaming of You," which was her first English single off the album of the same name that was just coming out. And then they show the actress that played Yolanda in the car crying, "I did this to my friend, I did this to my friend," and they announce it, but they never show it. You know what I mean? And I think the reason why is because they didn't really want to traumatize the audience, because in the end they were right. It wasn't too soon to expose the world to her, but it was too soon to really dwell on the tragedy. The wounds were still fresh in a lot of people's mind. By the time they came out with the Netflix series, it was years and years later. Like it was 2020. So but with this one, it was still too new. So I mean, that's the end. There's other scenes with Selena and Chris where she talks about she wanting to have kids. She wanted to have a farm with a bunch of animals, and her, where her and Chris elope, and eventually they find out on the radio. Uh, the family finds out on the radio, and eventually Chris and Abraham, they do become friends and they do become cool. But it's just really sad, especially the part with a lot of kids. She wanted to start having kids after the English album. She wanted to do the English album first, and then start a family with Chris. You know what I mean? And he goes, "Let's get started," you know, and he picks her up, and they go to the bedroom. Really sweet uh, moments between them, you know, and knowing that, it becomes way more sadder, guys. When you know that she had so much a life ahead of her that she was not able to achieve because it was cut short by some maniac, in Yolanda. So ultimately, I give this movie an A+. I love this film. I must have watched it a bunch of times over the years. In 2021, it was selected for the library preservation in the National Film Registry in the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And it was re-released on April the 7th, 2022 in select films for the 20th anniversary of it. So it is, and you just know that she would have been a great mother. She would have been a great artist because, like I said, after that, um, Latinos blew up in the public eye. J Lo became famous off this film, and because of this film, this catapulted J Lo, who had never sang before this, into a musical career. Of course, she copied Ashanti and she copied other people, but in an ironic twist, J Lo became what Selena was supposed to be. She became the face of Latin Latin pop, the was basically one of the biggest artists of the early 2000s, with the help of Diddy and the help of uh, and Ja Rule and others. Where what Selena was supposed to do, J Lo actually, did. You know what I mean? Like, because like I said, she died in '95. Latin music started to really blow up. Latino performers singing English started to really blow up around 1997, 1998, almost around the time when the movie came out. You started seeing Ricky Martin come out, Mark Anthony, who started off in English, but really, became really successful in Spanish. Revitalizing salsa in the '90s. Um, he came out. Um, Christina Aguilera, who originally came out as a white artist, emphasizing her white side, but because of the Latino craze that swept through music in the late '90s, Christina Aguilera, who's mixed, started to emphasize more her Latina heritage with a Spanish album, you know, and um, this says she can't sing but she can dance, yeah. So it's true, J Lo. And then J Lo in the early 2000s started to collaborate with Ja Rule, like I said, Ashanti, Ain't It Funny, I'm Real, and even in rap, J Lo, Fat Joe and Big Pun blew up, in 1998 and 1999 respectively. So the late '90s, that was the Latin Renaissance. That was the first time ever, not even Renaissance. That was the first time ever in the history of American music that Latina artists blew up in the way they did. You know what I mean? Like everybody knew "Living La Vida Loca." Everybody knew um, Santana, who had been out in the '60s, who his career died out. He came back out, and he was his album. Like the Latin craze was so crazy in the late '90s that his album even blew up. This album, the soundtrack to this movie, got to number one on the Billboard chart. So Latin music was everywhere for the first time ever in American history. Since the advent of rock and roll, like in the 40s and 50s, like when Desi Arnaz was the late 40s, early 50s, when Desi Arnaz was doing his thing. We talked about it in Meet the Ricardos, that movie review Lisa and I did. Latin music was blowing up back then, but that was before rock and roll. In the post rock and roll era, Latin music had not made a dent. That's why Selena's father said what Selena's father said, that Hispanic artists can't make it in the American music market, because up until that time it had been true for the most part. In all genres of American music, Latinos and Latinas never really made it. You know what I mean? Fat Joe struggled when he first came out in '95. Mark Anthony, like I said, he had to switch to Spanish. Selena had to switch to Spanish. You know what I mean? Nobody, it was tough for Latino artists. But because of the impact of this film and because of the impact of Selena's legacy, she made a lane that others, particularly J Lo, followed. Cardi B, yeah, but okay, yeah, that's true, Lisa. But that's in 29. I mean, that's in 2018, 2019. That I'm talking about in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, up until it was very hard for, like, if basically if you were a Latino artist and you couldn't pass for black or white, what you basically had to do was sing in Spanish. You had to sing in Spanish, and you were boxed in singing in Spanish, or rapping in Spanish. You know what I mean? Because they consider it as that was your lane. That you're a Latin artist. If you could pass for black or white, then you sang either. Uh, right. Yeah, Lisa's correct. It's still kind of hard for Cardi. Cardi, yeah, it's still kind of hard for Latin artists. Takashi has talked about this, and I know people hate Takashi. You know what I'm saying? Like, uh, people consider him a snitch and stuff, and he is, and he's not really a talented rapper, but he has talked about this, that it's hard for Latinos. He talked about it in particularly the hip hop, but it's true in all American genres of music, whether it's country, whether it's hip hop, whether it's R&B, whether it's pop, whether it's rock. If you basically are light skinned enough or dark skinned enough to pass for either black or white, they'll tell you to do that. You know what I mean? And don't talk really about your Hispanic heritage, which is why Christina Aguilera, when she first came out, she could pass as white, so she passed as white. you, You know, certain rappers that are mixed African American and Hispanic heritage, like Fabulous, Nori, when those guys first came out, uh, people just thought they were just black rappers. You know, you know what I mean? They didn't mention their Latino heritage at first. Neither one of them. You know, it wasn't until uh, Spanish music really started blowing up after the wave I'm saying, you know what I mean, after the 90s and the 2000s that Nori started even talking about it. Yeah, they are. Lisa, yeah, they are. Fabulous, uh, his father's black and his mother's Dominican, and Nori, his mother is black and his dad's Puerto Rican. Yeah, so like they would try to pass as other ethnicities, and if they had the typical Latina look or Latino look, like for example Selena did, or for example um, uh, J Lo or Mark Anthony. Well, J Lo came after Selena, but Mark Anthony and others, they had that look, and they couldn't pass for any other race. They would just say, "Well, sing in Spanish." And then they would be stuck in that Spanish lane because the only people that would listen to their music would be other Spanish people that understood Spanish. You know, so there was no way that they were going to blow up doing that. But now you have artists who are non Spanish trying to do Spanish music, like Drake on his newest album, because he realizes that's a new lane, you know, for him, and he's not Spanish at all. So you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting the impact that Selena had on music. You know what I mean? Look at what Latino artists were like before Selena, and then look at where they became after her. You know what I mean? They used to have to hide their heritage. Even we talked about Richie Valens in the 50s. He's a Mexican American kid from Southern California, and his name is Richie Valenzuela. And people were like, no, you don't want to be Richie Valenzuela. You want to be Richie Valens. You want to try to fool them to think you're white. You know what I mean? Because they're not going to accept a Mexican kid singing, you know, rock and roll music, which at the time was either black or white, you know. But he comes out with La Bomba. So there was no mistaking for that. But his first song was Donna, and you couldn't even tell. You know what I mean? So they wanted to try to hide that from the audience because not because they were ashamed of it, but because they didn't want to be boxed in. You know, and speaking of Cardi B, in 2019 she performed at the Astrodome in Selena's outfit, in the exact same purple outfit that Selena performed in. And she has paid tribute to Selena on David mentioned Nicki Minaj on the song that they did together, um, Motorsport, featuring them and the Migos. Cardi B pays tribute to Selena, saying that she's the trap Selena. You know, which of course angered some of the fans, but you know, I felt like it was a cool tribute. You know what I mean? Like she's existing in the lane that Selena paved for Latin artists. It was disrespectful to Selena, some of the fans say, because Selena's music and her style was conservative and Cardi B's is anything but. But you know, people pay tribute in their own different ways. I don't feel like it was anything disrespectful in my book, anyway. You know, she wasn't saying she's the next Selena or she's on Selena's level. She was saying of trap music, the specific type of hip hop that she performs, she's like another Selena because she's a Latina making her way in the music business. That's the way I took it. And I took it as a tribute, not a mocking thing. The family didn't care. They thought it was cool, but the fans, you know, sometimes fans are a little bit more uh, ignorant than even the family. Like, but they had a lot in common, man. Her and Michael Jackson, one of the things they had in common, their families were both Jehovah's Witnesses, and their fathers both didn't care. They took them to clubs and shit, and they weren't supposed to be there by their Jehovah's Witness beliefs. Hell, they weren't even supposed to sing Christmas music. And she has Selena sing Christmas music, and also Michael Jackson and the Jackson Five sang Christmas music. It was against their religion. But I think in both their cases, even though the fathers were part of that religion too, I think in both their cases, the fathers went along with what the mothers were talking about. The mothers were like Selena's mom and Michael's mom. They were more into the religion, and the kids, Michael and Selena respectively, they were into the religion. But the fathers really weren't into the religion. They were they were just going, along with it to please the mom. you know. you know. But Selena definitely was into that religion, and that was one of the things that many people criticized about it, was because one of the ways she died was that she bled out, right? And immediately after she passed away, they started spreading the rumor that she had gotten to the hospital and she was going to get a blood transfusion, but the family refused because of their Jehovah's Witness belief. That wasn't true. By the time she got to the hospital, there was no blood transfusion was going to save her. All her vital organs were failing. But tabloids, they spread these vicious rumors, and they already don't like the Jehovah's Witness religion. Many people in the media consider that religion to be a cult. You know what I mean? There's always been persecution and insults about them because they're not, you know, they're not considered as mainstream as like Catholics or regular other Christians like Baptists and Methodists. So, they have different beliefs. So, of course, the media is going to down them and use Selena's death as a way to down them just because that was her religion. You know what I mean? Like, it's bullshit. You know, like, but yeah, rest in peace to Selena. A very important day, crazy. That's a very important day for Mexican Americans today because not only is it the anniversary of Selena's passing, but also another thing is that we talked about it. Cesar Chavez is his birthday, so March 31st is really uh, like a basically a holiday slash day of mourning for Mexican Americans, Chicanos around the country, both for Selena's passing and the birthday of this civil rights leader. Thank you, David and Lisa, for contributing. Uh, love when you guys are on. David coming up with his fantasy matches once again. David, don't worry, we'll be doing more wrestling videos soon, but this is all dedicated to Selena. Peace.